Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to the Terasem Movement 12th Annual Workshop on Geoethical Nanotechnology on what happens to be the 48th anniversary of the first lunar launch. Now, I ask for your patience as I run through a few tips and hints that are up on the screen. Only the presenter will be advancing the slides on the presentation screen, so if you happen across them, please don't touch them. Unless you are a presenter, please do not engage your speaker or voice chat control during the workshop. And of course, we ask that each speaker try to remember to turn off their speak control after. If you forget, I'll remind you gently. Presenters, please turn your cell phone or other signal emitting devices off or place them sufficiently away from your computer while the microphone is engaged. Failing to do so may interfere with the audio recording. Attendees, these proceedings are being video and audio recorded, so please refrain from using the chat box until the Q&A sessions after each presentation. There is ample time at the end of the workshop for greater business and/or social interaction, and anyone is free to leave me a message in the chat box for any information they may have missed, which they feel I may have. So now I wish all a positive workshop experience, and we will move to our introductory presentation, which I will be giving. Now I would like to introduce the 12th Annual Workshop on Geoethical Nanotechnology, and after which I will introduce today's first speaker. Now, some of you may be wondering why geoethical nanotechnology, or what it is. Why host this workshop on the anniversary of the first lunar landing, which I mentioned, and how does this tie in with climate change? Well, geoethics, as defined by Martine Rothblatt, is the study of technology risk benefit management across geographic spaces. So the purpose of creating this workshop is to create a geoethical safe harbor for nanotech, a safe harbor uniting science and technology. Terasem hosts this workshop on the anniversary of the first lunar launch, Space Day, because nothing within the last 100 years better exemplifies the ability of people to take something said to be so impossible like space flight and make it possible, and do it so quickly from a goal to reality in less than 10 years, and all guided by cooperation with due regard to others. Now, geoethics is an evolving concept that treats the planet or a planet as a patient. Heal the planet, but first do no harm. Per Eric Drexler's 1986 Engines of Creation, nanotechnology is the precision building of something atom by atom, molecule by molecule. Now, Terasem Movement believes nanotechnology will be one of evolution's primary vectors for improving human lot and disseminating humanity universally. Now here, I was inspired by a previous Terasem event theme. Within his activation of energy, Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit priest and scientist from the early to mid part of the 20th century, we might say at this moment, as in the time of Galileo, that we most urgently need in order to appreciate the convergence of the universe is much less new facts than a new way of looking at the facts and accepting them, a new way of seeing combined with a new way of action. That is what we need. Geoethics is a key mission of Terasem, as diversity demands integration with nanotech. Unity requires an agreement amongst those who may be adversely affected by the risks, and joyful and continued existence requires that the ratio of benefit to adverse uses of technology be maximized. Well, I would like to thank you for bearing with me through my introductory presentation. And with a background in physics and as the managing partner of Network Society Ventures, a leader in the global technology landscape, of his work, David Orban explains, my vision is at the crossroad of technology and society as defined by their co-evolution. So everyone please assist me in welcoming David Orban to the podium. Okay, so we'll give him a second or two to reboot. Okay. David, are you able to speak? Okay, David, I offered an introduction and then I noticed that you had to reboot. So I have given an introduction for you. So if you could please step up to the podium if you're able to speak.
Yes, I hope that we will have no further interruptions, and I am happy and honored. Okay, let me just orient my viewpoints so that I can click on the two slide visualizers. Can you all hear me well? Julio, Lori, and audience?
Yes.
That's wonderful. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the introduction. Even though I didn't hear it, I'm sure it was wonderful. And I am looking forward to the editing magic that Julia will eventually apply to the recording so that I can hear it there. My thinking is empowered and emboldened by my analysis and understanding of exponential technologies and decentralization, which in my view is a very natural consequence of the first. I am David Orban Agnon here in Second Life. I've looked at my avatar and I am over 11 years old. When I started in Second Life, I think there were like 2,000 of us or so. I do like to keep in touch, so please feel free to seek me out on the various online platforms that we are using these days to continue the conversation. Also, those of you who read Italian, you are welcome to check out the book that I wrote about many of the subjects that we will be talking about today, as well as if you speak or read English, as I assume you do if you are here, to do the same in the electronic format available for the English version. Also, there will be an event in Milan that I would like you all to check out, the Singularity U Italy Summit, that touches on a lot of advanced technologies at the end of September for 2 days. And it is certainly going to be an interesting event for those who want to understand what are the implications of exponentials in their community, the society that they are part of, but also very importantly, the outlook of disruption that their enterprises may go through, and how to ride the waves of these changes rather than being swept aside by them. The exponential changes is not easy to identify, especially at the beginning, when it is easy to confound it with linear changes in the middle of very noisy interactions, when the naysayers may win against those who believe that the rapid advancements in a cumulative fashion are going to indeed surprise with their force that is going to change, well, if not everything, the specific field that you may at that point be looking at. A fundamentally important distinction that I cannot stress enough is that when we are talking about exponential change through technology, we are never referring to a single generation in the field, which indeed can and unavoidably peter out in achieving its maximum potential, as you can see in the upper left corner of this slide, used with permission by from Ray Kurzweil. But what we are talking about is the successive invention and deployment of generation after generation of technologies that are capable of ever improving performance, ever cheaper and broader availability, and what we have seen in the past 50 years through Moore's law. It turns out that evolution evolves. This is not a trivial statement of tautological banality. The tools that the universe creates in order to know itself are getting better and better. The evolution of stars is unaware of its own life cycle. The third, fourth generation stars like our sun contain the seeds of life without understanding its potential. Life itself on Earth took billions of years to create the rich generative infrastructure, the ecosystem of biology, and we are rightly in awe looking at its potential, but we should not stop from analyzing, understanding, and extending it. Life itself gave rise to humanity and to our technological civilization. And through the invention of fire and the incredible power of the planet-spanning superstructure that allows us today to be together, to share the exhilarating memetic advances that we use in order to seek solutions to our current and future challenges, are something that we can and should be proud of. we are augmenting the tools with which we understand the universe. And these tools must be explored, must be understood with their various implications as we evolve better and better understanding of how our technological civilization complements and sometimes supplements the biological substrate from which it has been born. This is the way to create resilient solutions that are needed in order to resist the disruptions that certainly we will be facing on Earth and beyond. And the technological civilization that is now the defining factor in the life of Earth, to the point that geologists are debating to name Anthropocene the geological era that we are living in, with the beginning characterized by the recognizable radioactive plutonium deposits in the strata that millions of years from today will be pointed at by scientists to say, indeed, that is when Anthropocene started. We are mapping the planet at ever finer granularity, both physically as well as in the noosphere, the things we know about the planet and about ourselves. The granularity of this mapping is starting to touch the quantum mechanical limits, and the encoding of this knowledge is itself a rich data set that we are spreading around as a new knowledge layer on the planet in the nodes of the forthcoming Internet of Things that is blurring the divide between biological and technological, for the very essential reason that in order to build sustainable deployments of tens or hundreds or thousands of billions of nodes of the Internet of Things, these must become biocompatible. We cannot afford to pollute the surface of Earth with rare metals that are indeed extraterrestrial. They are the result of asteroid impacts, and they are incompatible with life. We have to redesign both the hardware of the forthcoming networks we are building and the software so that it is intelligent, it communicates intuitively to us and others. One of the astonishing limits, as much as we admire nature and biological life, is that depending on solar energy, it only extends to a very limited radius around the planet, to the radius defined by the depth where solar rays can penetrate in water, and of course to a very limited depth on the solid continents, and in height to the limit where oxygen starts to be scarce and stops biological organisms to thrive. but with solar panels, whether earth-based or space-based, with fiber optics, with hydroponics and 3D printing, we are actually capable through the technosphere to extend the reach of the biosphere to an arbitrary depth and an arbitrary height. We are often confronted by ecologically conservative groups to restrain ourselves, to refrain from dreaming too ambitiously, and to recognize not only our individual mortality, but the mortality of the species and the limits to our ambitions as we try to understand and explore the universe. Renouncing these dreams is the very definition of mimetic death. Our curiosity and our ambition defines us. And if we were to embrace that point of view, the human adventure would end. Being able to redefine through the technological solutions that we have available and that will become through exponential increase in their power, decrease in cost, and broadening availability, is going to enable us to overcome this limiting viewpoint. And it is going to help us go in directions in a healthy increase of the human population globally without being constrained by the current understanding of the limits of the carrying capacity of Earth. As we learn more and more about these possibilities and we deploy them, whether imposed by climate change in those areas that will be desertifying rapidly and would not be able to support advanced civilization through traditional agricultural means, or because we want to thrive in communities that are more and more defined by their common interests rather than by their geographical proximity or the happenstance of birth, like blockchain technologies are enabling more and more people, we can recognize that these developments are unstoppable. This is what the organizations that I created a few years ago, Network Society Research, Network Society Ventures, which is a seed stage investment fund for startups, and most recently Network Society Lab, that is a venture development organization focusing especially on the initial coin offerings or token distribution events of blockchain and tokenized economic initiatives. We are looking at how the different pillars of civilization can step up the challenge and really move our moral ambitions through the help of a new tool set of ideas to new heights. And these new organizations are extremely ambitious. We are talking about not only understanding that we have to carry out the experiments that we have already been doing for tens and hundreds of thousands of years with open eyes rather than with closed eyes, with open minds, and proudly sharing our understanding of what is the responsibility of humanity as a species, but we will also empower and emancipate individuals and communities to achieve their full potential through experimentation and learning in a manner that is fundamentally important to preserve and to promote the dignity of individuals and groups of individuals, regardless of their place of birth or original location. And we will, through technology, empower these communities to thrive, overcoming the panicky reactions of nation states that do not understand how we can indeed be different from dinosaurs that did not have telescopes. The transformations that we already brought on the planet are enormous. In an eye-blinking geological times, starting from 10,000 years ago, we completely reversed the proportion of the biomass of terrestrial vertebrates, where everything you can see on National Geographic television or magazine is concentrated in the sliver of red on the right side of this chart. And everything else is what the human technosphere and our global civilization have created in terms of species. The lucky decision-making that brought to the closing of the ozone hole was an important achievement. Our capability of taking fundamental global industrial decisions that avoid globe-spanning disasters has been proven. We must strive to match and exceed that standard of responsible global decision-making. It is not a question of striving to be sustainable. Unsustainability proves itself to be a mortal mistake. And so it is a natural path, economically, ecologically, technologically, and morally, to go in a direction that, whether we are in Hong Kong or New York or in Second Life, can allow human civilization to thrive. Pretty soon, together, in a shared responsibility with our intelligences that in the millions, as different from each other as they are from us, are not going to represent Hollywood-style enemies that are appearing in movies necessarily apocalyptic in order to maximize their ticket sales, but they will be our allies against the real enemy, which is represented by dumb machines. These approaches are going to increase the carrying capacity of Earth tenfold. We must count on tens of billions of brains in order to generate the geniuses that are going to come up with the necessary solutions to our future challenges. And these are the approaches that are going to be replicated in space, whether we are talking about colonizing the moon, whether we are talking about mining asteroids, whether we are talking about terraforming Mars. There is plenty of room at the bottom, and as we are exploring quantum mechanical and nanotechnological limits to our ingenuity and creativity, we can be assured that what we are attempting to do is possible. As Feynman and von Neumann and Ulam were discussing these possibilities 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, they felt the kind of acceleration that new realms of mimetic exploration afford to those who dare to dream ambitious dreams. And we are now in the privileged position to be concretely able to act on those dreams in order to give larger degrees of freedom to everybody who is ready to experiment, in order to increase the choices that each of us and our communities can apply in order to solve our challenges. And today, there's really almost an infinitesimal distance between coming up with an idea and starting to act on it. The tools we have are incredibly powerful, and we have unbounded opportunities to explore the future of this planet, of other planets, and the universe together. Thank you.
Any questions for David may be put into the chat box in the lower left side of your bottom toolbar. Please feel free.
So I'm responding to Lori's question regarding the United States pulling out from the Paris Accord. The federal organization of the United States is extremely flexible. And it has been very interesting to see that regardless of this decision at the federal level, several states and several cities actually declared that they will abide by the constraints of the Paris Accord that they perceive as not only achievable, but as an extremely useful goalpost that evolves technological and economical solutions that they believe will make them more resilient and better able to compete on the global scene. The choice is available to every country, every region, every city, and every individual, whether they want to face the challenges of the future and whether they want to do so with open eyes and relying on reason and science, or whether they want to be part of the rear guard of those who are dragged into the future, kicking and screaming. But the future is coming at 1 minute per minute, at a speed that we are all experiencing as time travelers. And there are unstoppable changes that those that don't recognize very easily will be seen by those who adapt to those changes in the geological strata, like the skeletons of dinosaurs that we see, and we shake our heads because we understand that they were not up to the task. To respond to Ario Boa's question, what is the most useful thing an average citizen of the world can do in order to take advantage of the future I am presenting? Obviously, many changes are happening simultaneously. And even those who are professionally inclined or constrained to follow those changes have a hard time. For me, it was enlightening that after having alerted them 6 years ago about the power of blockchain technologies, friends of mine, in an almost panicky reaction, contacted me at the beginning of this year if I could please tell them again what I saw back then that they missed, and how can they now gain back the time that they lost. And these were not people who are technophobes. One of them is the CTO of a robotics company. The other teaches Silicon Valley geeks advanced data science and machine learning through courses that he himself designed. So it is important that nobody tries to understand deeply all of these changes. Our reaction, where we click on like on Facebook if somebody posts an article, having only read the title and not the full article, is a useful evolutionary adaptation, almost necessary. But it is our duty to understand superficially what is going on in almost every field, because the types of transformations, the power of exponential change and decentralization is touching everywhere in our economy and in our lives. So learning and recognizing and acting upon those changes is what can and should be done today. And then you can be curious enough to get your hands dirty in a few, let's say, a half a dozen technologies. You are curious about blockchain, you are curious about solar energy, you are curious about synthetic biology. These and many, many others have zero barriers to entry. And experimenting, learning, and simultaneously teaching is also possible, and I think is part of the duty of a modern citizen today. So I am responding to the question of laborious aftermath, I think, who is remarking on the fact that Internet of Things devices are unsecure. Yes, the Internet of Things cannot be deployed through unsecure devices. The various monitoring cameras, the various attempts at self-driving cars that are hackable, and other nodes are extremely dangerous, and they must be identified and substituted. Strong encryption is not a threat. It's an existential necessity. Those who preach that we should not allow strong encryption to be pervasively used don't understand that privacy is not a bigger advantage to the individual. Privacy is a necessary component to a flexible society that can evolve, turning minority opinion that is per definition illegal in a democracy into majority opinion, which could not happen if privacy was not respected and protected. The hackability of the IoT devices is not only a problem of security of communications or transportation or electric infrastructure. It is an existential threat to those societies and civilizations that don't understand that the future deserves reliable, always on, and dependable infrastructure that has the power to be as reliable as, for example, our DNA and RNA replication is. That is the standard bearer that we have to match in order to fulfill our dreams. So I'm responding to Philip Golding. He's asking, how can we realistically evolve the current state of global governance to one where the democratization of the benefits of technology innovation, the technology dividend, can be maximized? How do we make sure everyone benefits? The mobile phone in the mid-90s used to be the very symbol of elitary technology. You can find photos of yuppies, young urban professionals, leaning on their supercars and holding a brick against their head very proudly, with others jealously looking on. They could talk on those bricks for probably 10 minutes before frying their brains and totally running out of juice. But they were still feeling assured by their relative wealth that primitive communication device represented. Today, the mobile phone, even the smartphone, is universal. I've seen people both in Europe and in India literally sleeping on the pavement with extremely in extremely poor conditions, and they had their phone. They were connected to the internet. They had the opportunity to communicate, to learn, to emancipate themselves. The borderless nature of exchange of ideas is the best premise for the technology dividend to spread. We must fight against walls that cut down communications. We must increase the radius of awareness, of compassion, and of tolerance in order to build those networks of collaboration that benefit the widest possible number of people. I am responding to Elwe Tor, aka Elwe Ewing, who I believe is also an esteemed member of Vulcano, the Aboriginal Second Life community born almost 10 years ago. That was an extremely active seat of experimentation of social structures and an understanding ahead of its time of the power of decentralized organizations. Thank you, Elwi, for being here. He is asking, the more we are free to speak, the less it seems our speech weighs. Do you think that is true? The ability to express oneself is a privilege. And a lot of people ask me, how can they have their voices heard? The best way is just to start. I switch industries every 4 or 5 years, whether it is the Internet of Things or online video or venture capital or blockchain. I don't pretend to know more than I do, but I also don't allow myself to be slowed down by false modesty. And the privilege of being able to publish your thoughts allows people who have similar questions to yours to self-select and aggregate around you. You don't necessarily become the center, but you become a part of a network of interests. And within that network, you have every chance of becoming a thought leader that is worthy of every recognition on a planetary scale. As long as you are unafraid of confronting critics who can be destructive, as long as you are not afraid of making mistakes and recognizing them. And this has been my experience on a personal level, and this is also the experience a lot of people whom I advised or I mentored and who have gone out to get their hands dirty and then understand the results and the lessons of their experiences and write about them, create a YouTube video, or speak at a conference, or publish a paper or a book. This is truly the era of the citizen scientist, the citizen entrepreneur, the citizen politician, where nobody needs permission to have the ability to contribute value to the global conversation. So I think we are at the end, Lori, of our time allotted. I want to thank everybody for their wonderful questions and for the great hospitality of the Terasem movement here on Terasem Island. I'm looking forward, as I said, to continue our conversations on every possible online medium afterwards as well.
Thank you, David. That was a wonderful presentation. I found myself listening more to that than things I needed to pay attention to here in Second Life. But That was a wonderful presentation. In regards to our second speaker, utilizing her expertise in mechanical and astronautical engineering as one of the co-founders of Space Cooperative, she works to build an infrastructure that empowers global citizens to collaborate and to bring about positive social change on Earth and beyond. So please assist me in welcoming Yalda Musavinia to the podium. Let me bring your presentation up. And there you go, you're ready.
Okay, 1 second as I adjust here. Okay. Hi there. So yeah, I'm Yalda Musavinia and very honored to be here. It's my first time at this workshop and really my first time at an event in Second Life. Also, it's amazing to be here on the 48th anniversary of the lunar landing, and I'll tell you more about how how Space Cooperative's vision ties very much into space and also into solving problems here on Earth. So, with that being said, so first, I'm going to discuss Space Cooperative and our organization's goal, which is essentially going to space together. And then I'll discuss the solution we are developing, which is a social collaboration platform that will be unified by a cryptocurrency and eventually virtual reality. Then I'll describe how 2 sample missions, Terraforming Earth and a New Moon, will fit into this platform, and how with a strategic and motivated crowd, we can indeed march towards the stars in a way which has not been attempted yet. And you know, being a strategic crowd will require some initial governance, so I will close off the presentation with our proposed concept of operations. So this is a little bit of a quick visual summary of what I'll be presenting. Okay. So basically, Space Cooperative, we're a new worker-owned cooperative corporation, and we formed with the purpose and intent to serve multiple objectives of its members, including but not limited to promoting and pursuing the sustainable and peaceful human development on Earth and the planets beyond. We're currently refining our quadruple bottom line, and so far it's essentially people, nurturing the workforce to heal humanity, the universe, protecting our planet, and evolutionary expanding. Typically in triple bottom lines, this is a planet, but we think it's important to think more cosmically. Next is purpose, spending time on what your heart desires. That's exactly why members of Space Cooperative are part of the organization, and we hope to scale this because we think that that promotes prosperity, which is in a sense unleashing creativity on a massive scale. Okay, so basically this is all compacted into a single goal, or into a goal that is going to space together. So Space Cooperative is a network to enable collaboration among global citizens and organizations on large-scale space missions. This includes missions that are Earth-focused as well. Even though we say going to space together, we also say Earth is in space too. We believe it is important to focus in parallel on a next-order goal like going to space because it is something inspirational and it is something that is unknown and it is something that can unite humanity. But we shouldn't merely just leave our planet behind. We can go to space and save Earth at the same time. So as mentioned, I'll be discussing 2 sample missions, and you know, these are related to the twin goals of humanity. One, terraforming Earth. And I'll be just describing a program that's aimed at taking better care of our planet through science and future geoethical nanotechnology, and a new moon, and that's a program that will be a stepping stone to humanity expanding to the stars as our destiny. So how will this be accomplished? Essentially, you know, there are a few components to it. One is users need the ability to, you know, organize into local and virtual working groups, and the blockchain technology will be utilized to track mental and financial contributions. Collaboration will be decentralized and autonomous with democratic self-governance. And there will be an integrated VR experience which will provide immersive and energizing discussions and design spaces for next generation space endeavors. I know this sounds like a lot, and as a company, we haven't developed every component of this vision yet, but I'll tell you more in the end about what we have developed and what we foresee as the roadmap. So terraforming Earth. You know, we've all read a lot probably about how nanotechnology can combat climate change. I'm no expert in this field, but I've tailored this example to fit towards the presentation and to also describe how that integrates into the platform and how it's very related to going to the moon as well. So nanotechnology can terraform Earth by combating climate change in ways that relate to reducing emissions. So making cars more efficient or airplanes, like with lightweight nanocomposites. If you lower the mass of vehicles, that reduces emissions. Nanocoatings applied to aircraft, that will reduce the drag, so it uses less fuel. And then with nanocatalysts, you can improve fuel efficiency. That's already, that type of technology is already being used today. And then with batteries, if you increase the efficiency by reducing the weight of the batteries, essentially, you lower the mass of the vehicle. And, a lot of these technologies, they're very applicable to spacecrafts as well, or space missions. For example, if you build a rover on the moon, or you start building vehicles in outer space, you want the same sort of efficiency, or you want to launch less mass to space. So as we advance nanotechnology for Earth-based applications, we advance them for space-based applications as well. And if we can't use them on Earth, then we can use them in outer space in many use cases, as Martine Rothblatt also put forward in her paper for Terasem's journal in 2013. So how can it go mainstream? There essentially is not enough money to invest to truly advancing nanotechnology. Obviously there is money invested today. There is the research being done, but how can we accelerate it? How can we terraform Earth faster? How can we get to space faster? We need a way to invest in these technologies and also to incentivize that. So as I said before, for each mission, similar technologies can be developed. So there can be a crossover of these missions and these technologies. So for a new moon, I'm going to start talking about the moon more, and then I'm going to tell you how it connects with the solution that we are developing. So basically, the Apollo program employed 400,000 people and required the support of 20,000 industrial firms and universities at its peak. That's a lot of people. To truly create a civilization in space, we're going to need just as many people, if not more, that are working in coordination with artificial intelligence and nanotechnology. It doesn't need to mean that those technologies are being utilized in the beginning, but to really scale, it needs to be in the roadmap. You need all of these exponential technologies. So here was an article in 2013, and it's talking about moon mining and a lunar soil simulant. So essentially, if you combine this polymer with lunar soil, you can create lunar concrete. So that's something that's related to nanotechnology and something that can be applied to space as we build out there. So this is a quote from Nanotechnology for Sustainable Manufacturing by David Rickerby, and it says, "As humankind prepares for missions of multiple years in duration, it is clear that significant advances need to be made in life support systems. For instance, CO2 removal is essential to providing a non-toxic atmosphere, and current systems are limited by the ability to regenerate and by power. While we do not have examples of flying life support systems using nanomaterials, we want to highlight the great potential of high surface area and conductive nanomaterials to act as scaffolds for the reversible absorption and desorption of carbon dioxide with the potential for low volatility and low consumption of power. So essentially all of this is connected. Nanotechnology is connected to solving problems on Earth. It's connected to making it easier for us to live on the moon, but also for deep space exploration missions, going to the Mars or going further. Okay, just advancing that slide. So essentially, what we're trying to do is allow people to think with a more of a whole universe approach. When we think of a single planet solution, we're developing technology based on existing conditions. But with climate change and other catastrophes, the environment of a planet can change. But with more of a whole universe approach, our technology can withstand the forces of nature and time. And I'm not saying that we can come up with these modular solutions right away, but if people that were working on different aspects of nanotechnology came together on a single platform, you can accelerate the cross-pollination of ideas faster. So how do we contribute more funding and resources towards geoethical nanotechnology to save planet Earth and expand beyond, as is our destiny? So for large-scale missions, the budget of a government is typically needed. But what if we had a strategic crowd? And what if that crowd was binded by something like a token or a cryptocurrency? So the picture that has been behind these presentations is Earthrise, a famous photo taken in 1968. But just thought it would be funny to call this like Tokenrise. And this is a great quote by Buckminster Fuller. He says, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. So this transitions to the tool that we are developing, that Space Cooperative is developing. And the initial tool is a platform. It's a collaboration platform that will have different missions. But this is not something like the X Prize because the missions are supposed to all be tied together. People are supposed to come together to create a roadmap, a trajectory that will get us to space, but that will also solve problems on Earth at the same time. So here is one of the sample missions, Terraforming Earth. You see that within that sample mission, there are the different proposals. So these proposals are like the technologies that I presented earlier. People can propose how can we advance nanocomposites, how can we advance batteries, and then how can they actually be applied to real-world applications on Earth. And the people that are most experienced in those fields can join those proposals, that they can cooperate on it, they can share their research, and they can come together on it. So the network, there would be social profiles. With these social profiles, there would probably be a lot of similarities to LinkedIn because you want to list your skills, you want to list your background, and you also want to add your research. So with adding your research, it's not merely just a list of your publications, but it will have features similar to ResearchGate, where you can actually upload your publications, and if someone wants access to them, you can share that data with them. We think it's important to not have to rely on multiple social networks, multiple tools to share the information, because as new people are joining the internet, you don't want them to have to sign up for 20 different tools to be able to effectively collaborate. We think it's important to build upon this existing tool set to make it easier for people to join, to make it easier for people to share their research. So this is just, if you scroll down on the profile, you'd see more information like what missions a user is participating in and their publications and followers, etc. And then this was the other program where we're talking about a new moon. So for similar things, there would be proposals there, like a lunar concrete or a lunar rover. Okay, so how does this tie into VR that I was talking about earlier? The idea is that we want the proposals on the platform to also tie into a VR experience, because as you're building these new cities on Earth, as you're building these new cities on the moon, it would be great if people can actually experience what it would really be like the real engineering, the real physics that is going into the proposals. So for example, you click on the lunar rover proposal, and then all of a sudden you're in the VR experience and you see the rover there. And then you can actually, talk while you're there. So I guess think of Second Life combined with a platform with real space missions, and then experiencing the engineering work that is already being done with those missions. That's part of our vision. So essentially, there's no way to truly be an organization with a social purpose if geoethics is not in the model. In creating such a platform, how do you prevent militarized application of nanotechnology being developed? For example, the UK defense firm BAE Systems wants to grow drones and bats with chemical 3D printing. That technology will be great for printing rockets and rovers for the moon too. Why not? But if someone shares this solution, it can be militarized for purposes that are not geoethical. Or if someone wants to start building a space elevator with this new graphene material that MIT invented, well, what happens if we do build this giant space elevator and then it falls on a country on Earth? How do we even protect something that we consider geoethical, like the turmoil of it in a sense? If it breaks or if it fails would be non-geoethical. So something that I thought fits very well into the platform that we're developing also relates to a hypothetical organization that Martine presented in the paper I referenced earlier, for having an organization like SAGAN, the Society for Accelerating Geoethical Advances in Nanotechnology. So you can have these types of organizations that are on the platform that are evaluating the proposals and putting checks and balances in place to ensure that that the solutions won't be applied to things that aren't geoethical, or that the sharing of the information, the detailed information, it is kept in private until it is until it's known, okay, is the person that we can share this detailed research with trusting? So in some ways you can have a closed patent pool where that the person that you're sharing that information with, there is a trust built into who actually has that information, so the technology is not applied for non-ethical purposes. Okay, so I thought that, I don't know if you all watched the TV show Silicon Valley, but this was a opening or a sequence in an episode this year when the main character was like, we put a man on the moon using the computing power of a handheld calculator. But what if we used all those phones to build a massive network? Information would be totally free in every sense of the word. And then the other actor's like, oh, so you want to build a new internet? I mean, essentially, this is kind of what's going on today with Ethereum and all of the different ICOs that are happening, these decentralized apps. There's one for decentralized computing and all of these other decentralized apps that are being built on top of it. And a lot of people don't really recognize this, but we very well might be living on a new internet in a couple of years. And that's why Space Cooperative, we want to be part of that wave. Even though our initial platform will be launching on this existing worldwide internet, we think that's important to attract a wide audience. But to really scale is where you're going to need a token to connect everyone and to provide these incentives. So I'm going to describe how this fits into the network. So essentially, the platform would have multiple projects, and each project essentially would have a work breakdown structure. Before a project is activated, the community needs to agree that it's valid for funding. And then whenever it is agreed upon that it's valid for funding, if people donate to the missions, they get tokens for their donations. And then the people that work on them can either work on them for tokens or they can work on them for the cash that has been donated into the pool. This is a rough concept. We're still developing all of the mechanics, but essentially this is how a cryptocurrency can bind this network and provide incentives for people to actually work on these missions. Some people might want some immediate cash, others might be fine collecting the tokens. So the executive decision making, what we currently have proposed is it'd be a democratic system where you have to identify, you have to verify the identity, and one person has one vote as far as people voicing their opinion on if something should be funded. But also, an advisory board needs to be voted into place. So the community of users, they vote on who should be in the advisory board, and the advisory board would be voted in every year, and they have a 50.1% control over decision-making power. So essentially, if there is consensus among the advisory board, they have control over decision-making. But if there isn't, the users have a voice too. So think of this as a way of, instead of calling your Congress people, you can just put your vote in, and then that sways the needle in the way that the users actually prefer. So yeah, to strategically plan, you have to have a few different mandates, and some of the high-level mandates that we've identified right now is, social purpose, research and development, and near-term revenue. You need a balance of those to actually create a network that's profitable, but also to create a network that's not just profit-seeking, where we realize that research and development is important. There are definitely higher-risk projects that we need to prioritize to actually accelerate. But having social purpose and geoethics baked in the model, so you're actually giving back to the community, whether it's through education or compliance. And basically, there can be different roles and activities in the network, people that are coordinators, experts, there can be apprentices, committees, and then you have investors, enthusiasts, philanthropists, and they can be working on different aspects of it, whether it's, proposing missions, defining requirements, designing and developing concepts, or, producing, launching, and operating. And then I'm almost done here. And so it's like, well, how can this all work? How can you assure that the crowd is creating quality work? And this is why we think that there has to be a checks and balances type system. Before AI can help you and review all the work and tell you that it's good, you need to have humans involved in the equation. So there can be the people that are assigned the tasks, they deliver the work, and then there's a quality control type team, and they verify that the work was good. And if it wasn't, there's a multiplier on top of it. So if someone is consistently delivering poor work, then at least the tasks that they're assigned will be lower on the priority list, so they can gain more training, essentially. And then, the advisory board would have final approval. And in this chart you see, there's one box that says brainstorm, another propose, design, develop, test, launch, operate. So 4 of those boxes are white. Those are things that can be done from behind the computer without any real-world interaction. The other ones, develop, test, launch, those are the ones that actually require the physical products or the physical hardware. So I was just making that so you could see, well, a lot of this can be done virtually. So yeah, token rise. Traditional human power structures and their reign of darkness are about to be rendered obsolete. Another great Buckminster Fuller quote. And that's closes off my presentation. Okay, so Lori says, can you explain again what cryptocurrency is? So cryptocurrency is like Bitcoin or Ethereum, and it's a way to essentially build a system where you can hold value and that value is not necessarily attached to a bank account, and the people that are saying how much value that holds, it's a decentralized system of nodes that verify, okay, this transaction took place, so like how much cryptocurrency a person might have, for example. So why is this important in building this type of network? Because if you're building a global network, you want there to not be many different currencies that are in place here, as far as like, oh, someone goes to the network and they deposit Australian dollars, and then now that's attached to our bank account, and then we have to convert that to pay someone in their currency. With a cryptocurrency, your location, your country, it won't matter as far as if you're operating with a single currency. Actually, you can think of it as Linden dollars in Second Life. So it's similar to that, yet it's on the blockchain. But yeah, decentralized, public, immutable. So would it be a universal currency? Yes, exactly. So as David mentioned in his previous presentation, there are a lot of things happening in the world right now calling ICOs, or initial coin offerings, and a lot of these are either new blockchain systems like Bitcoin or Ether, or they're built upon an existing blockchain. So our current plan is to build upon the Ethereum blockchain with an ERC20 token. So that means you don't have to create your own blockchain. You use an existing one, and then you build a smart contract to describe how the value works. So there are a lot of blockchains that are making it easier for you to launch your own cryptocurrency by utilizing their blockchain, and that's a more efficient system, assuming that you agree with how their governance works and how scalable you feel it is applicable to what you're trying to do. So we haven't completely decided on the ERC20 token yet, but that is what is very standard in the community, or that is something that is becoming more of a standard today. Would individually created cryptocurrency make that universal currency more complicated? I guess it really matters what is the purpose of the cryptocurrency. For our vision, the purpose is not, oh, use this token and go anywhere and buy things with that currency. It's more of an internal accounting tool, but with something that can be traded on a public exchange for fiat currency. So it's not a currency where we want this to be on Amazon so you can make your purchases with this space coin, but more, this is a tool that you can use to make the accounting within the world simplified. So for example, with our virtual world, you can have this token that's also being used on the platform in that world. So at least within your system, there is some consistency. And then if you want, whenever you do feel like trading that currency for money that you can spend, you can go to an exchange that lists our currency and get money for that. So that, depending upon what exchanges list the currency, is how successful your token is to really be adopted on big exchanges. Julio, can you explain inflexible smart contracts versus human flexibility? Yeah, so in building such a network, it's necessary to have a hybrid solution where humans can work in coordination with smart contracts. And yes, exactly, a system that needs to optimally combine the two. So for example, one way that relates to the proposal that I just discussed is having an advisory board where, at least if there are people that the community voted with, the community trusts, if they feel like anything is ever going wrong, they have power to, for example, vote down a proposal that might be used for militarized applications. So I think as long as there are trust factors in place to ensure that the next advisory board, the people are vetted, then you can have a system that evolves as far as how the smart contracts work, how the community works. So you're still decentralized because the advisory board is not necessarily part of Space Cooperative, part of our organization, but it is democratically, people that are democratically voted in. And also to address Lori's comment back to, once again, when she said, would individually created cryptocurrency make the universal currency more complicated? There are solutions also being developed, like Bancor, where people can have their multiple cryptocurrencies, and it allows you to have more liquidity. So there will probably be more and more solutions where it's easy to exchange different cryptocurrencies. So I think that since these currencies still aren't attached to any single bank account, solutions can be developed where they are more, interoperable.
Yalda, below Julio's question, there's a question from Philippe Golding.
Oh, where is that? I don't see that question.
I reposted it.
Oh. I am not familiar with this Space Odyssey video game, but if you describe it, then I can click on it right now and try to.
So to reply to Julio's question to explain by voice, Neil deGrasse Tyson has launched a Kickstarter campaign. It's not concluded yet, where he's doing crowdfunding for a very ambitious game. The title says it all, called Space Odyssey, which would build a realistic and physically accurate cosmos and enable players to work together and go explore the cosmos and build technologies and do terraforming but all of it science-based. That's Neil deGrasse Tyson's association, and so his campaign has not concluded, and I haven't seen the full spec of the game, but it looks extremely detailed and deep, including things that you've mentioned in your presentation. So, but as you're not aware of his project, I don't think my question merits answering.
I mean, I guess I can just answer it by based on what I just quickly see on the Kickstarter as well. We think that there are, a lot of these game-like environments that try to have this real-world spin on what you're building inside the game. The difference is the game for us, or the virtual world, is more of a second priority. Our first priority is bringing people together to actually build things in real life, fund real-world projects. But the game is a way to actually experience projects that people really do want to be built. People really are doing the detailed engineering planning, creating 7-level deep work breakdown structures and understanding the costs of everything that's going involved. With the virtual world, people that aren't doing the engineering can actually really experience it, and we think that that will encourage more people to contribute to the real world physical projects actually being built. So for us, the virtual world is a way to tap into the audience that are not working on the projects on the platform in the real world sense, but for them to experience it, and you can start to, host different things in the environment, whether it's a Terasem workshop or having some interesting, science or physics, scientists or engineers or astronauts coming to present and give talks. So we think that the virtual world is a great way to build a community and tap into a lot of the space enthusiasts, and also for a way for the people that are building the real projects to have a way to showcase them. And right now, what we're considering as far as how to build our virtual world is we're looking at high fidelity, since it's open source, and Philip Rosedale has spoken on a few occasions where he's looking into the blockchain and how that can be utilized within high fidelity, although there is no documentation that says how can you currently integrate a cryptocurrency within high fidelity. But we think that since it's an open source platform and we wouldn't have to build the engine from scratch, so that's something that we are we're looking into exploring for whenever we do sync in our social profiles. So we're trying to research the possibilities between syncing our social profiles with the high fidelity social profiles, if that is the best platform for what it is that we're trying to do. So right now our focus has been the development of the web platform. As far as the roadmap goes, it's the web platform, the token, and then integrating that both into a virtual world. So you start to even create the digital economy within the virtual world. And I guess that's another difference between the Neil deGrasse one. I doubt that there's an integration with a cryptocurrency within that one. Yeah, and Lori says experiencing within a game seems like a safe way to demonstrate to people so they understand the fear, to demonstrate that which people do not understand or fear. Yeah, we think that having a virtual experience also of what these worlds can be like can inspire more people to want to be part of it, to want to learn the science or physics, or to be the artist that makes a movie about it, or writes a screenplay about it, or writes a story about it. We think that if you have the virtual world, then it can open the doors to many different things, whether it's something that a young student or a child can experience, and then they get inspired to create the world and create an educational path towards that.
Okay, Yalda, I think you might have time to address one more question that might be forming within the chat box.
Okay, I don't see anything yet.
I think someone was likening the descriptive game we were talking about to EVE Online and or Minecraft.
Like I said before, what we're trying to do, it's not the game as the first priority, but more the virtual world as an experience to really experience real world projects. It's not that, oh, this is real world physics for what's being built in that world. But no, like real world projects that that we hope that people would be funding and making those projects to come to life. And we think that, with a cryptocurrency, there will be more encouragement for people to fund the projects, or for people to actually build the projects for application in the real world, or for application for real life space missions.
Thank you, Yalda. That was very, very thought-provoking and very informative in regards to the currencies moving forward. I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. I will move the slides ahead, and I will introduce our next speaker. Give me 1 second. Okay, as an astrophysicist, a tech consultant, futurist, and award-winning science fiction author, David Brin is an expert in a wide range of topics, from astronomy and space exploration to nanotechnology, future predictions, and problem solving. So please, everyone, welcome David Brin to the podium.
Hello all, I hope you can hear me. Just give me a second. It is been a while since I've been on Second Life. And hello, Lori and the rest of you out there. Okay, so, yeah, well, I'm talking about the geoethics of Earth alteration, and I had a novel called Earth that was about this. Forgive me, can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Lori Rhodes and some of the others for making this possible. And let's, Second Life doesn't seem hardly any changed since I was last here. Let me just get my camera controls going, and whoops, that's not good. I need to move a little bit so that I can There we go. Okay, so who recognizes this? This is the Earthrise from Apollo 8. It happened in 1968. Most of your parents weren't born then, but the 1968 is the year that would have killed any of you whippersnappers out there. Any 2 weeks were more exhausting than any normal year. But at the end, my father was 30 feet from Robert Kennedy when he was shot. I got my college acceptance the day Martin Luther King was shot. The music was great, but we had one gift at the end of 1968 that gave us hope. It was like the jewel of hope at the bottom of Pandora's box, and that was the gift of the image of the Earth given to us by Apollo 8, the very last gift of the year. So there you are, there's our Earth, and what are we going to do about this tiny, tiny, tiny blue oasis? Well, I've talked about the whole question of, fate and civilization. I take it as seriously as Kim Stanley Robinson does. Kevin Costner made a movie of my book, The Postman, and Earth is all about our relations with this planet, and I take the whole Gaia hypothesis to an extreme that you might find interesting. And that was my book for grown-ups until I wrote Existence, which also is about, very grown-up, near-term themes. So there's lots to do. We have to deal with, I'm sorry, I'm having some problems here. Apparently these slides don't do their animations. All they are is JPEGs. So I should have thought about that. This slide shows, normally the animations show all sorts of things that are on our problem plate. Things to do, like dealing with poverty and pollution and all of that. So how can science and forward thinking deal with them? Well, some think that our progress into the future is ordained by something called a singularity. And the singularity is one of the background notions that we have to deal with in our, every time we deal with a crisis on Earth. And that is this part of the singularity, or is this something that the singularity might solve or exacerbate? I'm not going to explain the singularity to this audience. It's a pleasure to be with brainiac nerds, but it really is worth understanding the variations. The other of these bookend concepts is the Fermi paradox, and that is the question of why we haven't seen any signs of extraterrestrials, civilizations, when they should have preceded us in vast numbers and filled the sky with their works. That is, if our children, great-great-great-grandchildren, are going to be making mighty projects out there. So the question is, is it ordained that we are going to solve these problems simply by the rapid pace of progress? And there are some very good signs. For example, if you had gone back to if you were in 1985 and you had taken a bet as to how many species of whales would still exist in 2017, nobody you spoke to would have bet that all of them would still be around in 2017. But they are. Now, we are experiencing a Anthropocene, a major extinction, but it's coming at us from an odd angle and more slowly than the pessimists expected, with more opportunities to try to save the day, and I may have time for that. Okay, so will we move out there? There were some cool animations here, but alas, that's just an illustration from Patrick Farley's great video trailer to my novel Existence. So, all right, our getting out there is important for, among other reasons, as the B612 Foundation and some other groups, I'm on the board for the B612 Foundation, tries to catalog all the objects that might do us a dinosaur number. I mean, velociraptors may have been very smart, but they didn't have a space program, and that's why there are no velociraptors anymore. The number of impacts that have struck the Earth from asteroids over the years is certainly, I mean, you can see from that chart there. There's another chart that shows the number of Chelyabinsk-style airbursts that have happened in just the last 30 years. And if one of those airbursts happened during a major crisis on Earth, it might be mistaken for a nuclear explosion and trigger World War III. So there's a lot of serious attention paid to that. And the Planetary Resources Group, B612, there are many groups that are trying to look into this. And you can see in the upper left, you can see the Phobos, and in the lower right you can see Deimos. And these are all places, Phobos especially might be one of the most valuable sites in the solar system. Certainly the Russians have kept trying to plant their flag on Phobos, and they have failed again and again. But Phobos is potentially hugely attractive. It may be a carbonaceous chondrite asteroid. And there are many people who believe that if we could get out there and mine asteroids, that we would be so rich that we could turn the Earth into a park. But of course, this would make Earth mines and wells and things like that obsolete. And this is why one of our political parties wants asteroids, and the other has systematically demolished our attempt to get out to asteroids, and that political party wants to go back to the moon. It's amazing how such an abstract notion could be so firmly partisan. But keep your eye on it. If you ever see anybody American who wants to go back to the moon, join the Russians and the Chinese and the Europeans and the billionaires and the Indians and all the other wannabes who want to put dusty footprints back on that useless ball again, you'll know he's from one political party. All right, so there are all sorts of possibilities for how we could use asteroids, and one of them is the raw materials to make power satellites. If you were to mine the asteroids and turn them into habitats, so-called O'Neill colonies, there'd be enough to make a surface area for 3,000 Earths. Now, if you go out through the solar system, there are all sorts of possible places where there may be other life. You saw the other day Congressman Dana Rohrabacher on the Science Committee asked if there had been civilizations on Mars thousands of years ago. And this is somebody Paul Ryan appointed to be on the Science Committee. But as it turns out, there are places, much better places, where life might be flourishing. There may be up to 12 ice-roofed water worlds in our solar system. We know of at least 3 or 4, for sure. Another couple that are very likely. Europa and Enceladus, almost certainly Titan, underneath its wax and methane oceans, is ice that may be covering a water ocean. Ceres has been pretty much confirmed recently, Callisto and Ganymede. And now we believe Pluto may have a water ocean buried under ice. And this doesn't need Goldilocks zones, by the way. This means that almost any star out there, certainly any solitary star that's not a close binary, likely has life, because it likely has ice-covered water worlds, and I believe it's very likely that that would result in life. Now, would that be intelligent life that could communicate with us? Very likely not. But it is indicative of how amazing the universe is. And of course, there's the pillars of creation. You head out there, and who knows what's possible. On August 7th, I will be speaking at keynote, kicking off the Starship Congress in Monterey, California. And I urge you to look it up and possibly help with the Kickstarter. Miguel Alcubierre, the inventor of the Alcubierre drive, which is the least implausible current considered form of warp drive that might be possible someday. I should point out that I'm on the board of the Council of Advisors of NASA's Innovative and Advanced Concepts Group. So we give grants to all sorts of barely plausible things. Okay, so this is a look at the continuously habitable zones surrounding our sun and other suns. And so they've taken some of the many planets that we've discovered over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, we knew of no planets outside our solar system. And those working with the Drake equation actually thought that the fraction of stars with planets might be small. We astronomers always knew that it was extremely likely that planets were everywhere for certain reasons that had to do with angular momentum, and we were proved right. But the Goldilocks zone, the habitable zone around a star, depends on its distance depends upon whether the star is a red dwarf, which most stars are, or a a yellow star like ours, or a giant. The giants have short lifespans. And if you take a look at the calculations for the Gaia effect, then you realize that the Goldilocks zone around a star like our sun is extremely wide. What happens is that whatever planet is in that zone, it will reach a Gaia balance in the shape, in the type of atmosphere it has. The continuously habitable zone, or CHZ, of our sun extends beyond Mars. Mars would have oceans today if Mars had been large enough to hold on to an atmosphere. That atmosphere would have reached a Gaia balance of being very, very dense with CO2. So we would have been able to go to Mars, and as long as we wore a respirator helmet, we'd have been able to go down to the down to surf in the Martian oceans in shirt sleeves. So you would. The problem with Mars is that Mars was too small. If Venus had been where Mars is, we'd have a sister world with oceans. Now, as you get closer to the sun, the Gaia balance that you have to strike in order to reach thermal balance requires less and less greenhouse effect. We skate the very inner edge of our sun's continuously habitable zone. And so as a result, the Earth has to have a almost completely transparent atmosphere to lose heat fast enough. That's why our Gaia balance has only enough CO2, barely enough CO2 for plants to be able to do their thing. Any more than that, and we start to overheat. And this is a perfect answer to those anti-science doofuses who proclaim as one of their denialist rationalizations, how could human beings affect a whole planet? Well, in fact, we can, because the planet was on a delicate balance. And in fact, within just 150 million years, only twice the time since the dinosaurs, the inner edge of the sun's Goldilocks zone will pass the Earth, and we'll be in real trouble. Our descendants will have to do things. Some of the things that are discussed is putting parasols out between us and the sun at the libration points, the L Lagrangian libration points, and therefore reducing the amount of sunlight. Yeah, but that requires extensive maintenance over the course of hundreds of millions of years. I have a better answer. So I'm racing along through things, but I hope some of you understand the continuously habitable zone much better than you did before. One of the things we're talking about is the possibility of making beanstalk space elevators. That'd be fabulous. Read Kim Stanley Robinson's Red Mars to see one illustrated. Mars is actually a better place for this than the Earth for several reasons, because it's not as difficult to find the right materials for Mars, and also if it falls, the damage that it does is less likely to cause a lot of death. But if you want to have a real fun riff on what our descendants might do, look up my name, David Brin, and lift the Earth. I have a YouTube and a blog that goes into more detail, but the YouTube rant, entertainingly, I'm told, tells you how we could lift the Earth away from the sun. And it's not any of the methods that you have heard. Those methods are, excuse me, stupid. They would do more harm than good. But mind you, I used the asteroid method in one of my short stories, which was in all of the Best of the Years anthologies last year, called The Tumble Downs of Cleopatra Abyss. And I used that method to raise Venus, to give Venus oceans by pummeling it with millions of comets. I should mention that somebody in the audience, Yalda Musavinia, will also be speaking at the Starship Conference. And Eskatoon Magic says Liu Cixin has a wonderful novelette called The Wandering Earth. How cool. Okay, so so that'll entertain you. There are lots of things at my website and at my blog that deal with space or the future or getting out there, and unfortunately there's a fair amount on politics as well. So the other thing we can do, other than modifying worlds, is modify ourselves and our children. So we're already modifying ourselves and enhancing ourselves the old-fashioned way. And this is a street scene in San Diego, as envisioned by Patrick Farley, who did the wonderful 3-minute video trailer for my novel, Existence. And I urge you to go to davidbrin.com, go to books, click on Existence, and watch the 3-minute video trailer for that novel, because it's the most fun you'll have in 3 minutes with your clothes on. This is actually a panorama that scrolls from left to right, and it shows people enhancing themselves with prosthetics of memory and attention. Well, we've been doing that ever since we discovered printing presses and glass lenses. Every generation has enhanced what it can know by adding prosthetics for memory outside their heads in the form of books and now the internet, and prosthetics for vision to be able to see more, and prosthetics for attention. And this is part of another hour-long talk I could give. So are we augmenting? Some of these slides are just going to, the possibility of one of my short story collections is called Otherness. It's almost as good as my recent collection, Existence of Vision, that has that Venus story in it. But there are all sorts of ways in which we might add to the diversity of our civilization. We might uplift almost sapient creatures like chimpanzees and dolphins to be our partners, and I portray this in the Uplift novels. We might meet aliens. We're certainly looking. I'm involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and some of the debates over METI, whether or not we should message to extraterrestrial intelligences. And in the lower right-hand corner, there's the option of altering our children. And I give talks about human augmentation and all the different ways in which it might happen. We already certainly share the planet with pre-sapient races. And that is a whole talk in itself. Every year, it seems, we find another species on Earth that has basic pre-sapient abilities. It has some degree of semantic language, some degree of planning ability, as we saw just a few weeks ago with corvids, crows, and ravens. Chimps, dolphins, other apes are only a little bit above sea lions and monkeys and elephants and parrots, and now prairie dogs. They all seem to cluster under a glass ceiling of very similar semantic and tool-using abilities, which actually is not humbling for us, because it shows just how the whole business of intelligence apparently is easy up to a certain level, and beyond that glass ceiling is extremely hard. How did we do that? I have some papers about that. Okay, here's the famous Drake equation, the equation that we use for arguing over, why we haven't seen aliens. And it's the equation that is highly criticized. I've written papers saying that it's incomplete. For instance, it doesn't include any of the theories as to whether or not it's possible to notice aliens. Even if the Drake equation supplies us with aliens, if they live modest, quiet lives on comets, we wouldn't know. If they consist of interstellar self-replicating probes that, like asteroid belts, then we might find them in a few years when we go to the asteroid belt. And I portray that in the last third of my novel Existence. But the Drake equation is all about, what fraction of solar systems have potentially life-bearing planets. And as I said, I think it's all of them, if you include ice-roofed moons. What number of Earth-like planets are there with surface oceans that and especially with enough continental mass that you might get creatures like us that use hands, that have hands and use fire. And I think that's among the top 10 explanations for the Fermi paradox, that most water worlds have more water and less land area. Because don't forget, we skate the inner edge of our sun's Goldilocks zone. So Earth may be especially dry for a water world, in which case we'll get out there and we'll find lots and lots of intelligent life, but none of them with starships or weapons. That's the most optimistic of all of the explanations for the Fermi paradox. Another one that's slightly optimistic but a little depressing is F sub I, the fraction that crash through the glass ceiling and become technologically capable. I believe there's some reason to believe that we are exceptionally smart, which is kind of depressing, especially if you watch the Monty Python Meaning of Life, where Eric Idle sings the universe song and ends with, "We better hope that there's intelligent life somewhere out in space, because there's bugger all down here on Earth." One of the problems with Second Life is I can't hear whether you're laughing or not. Laugh louder. All right, so this is another Patrick Farley image from Existence, where the astronaut has pulled in a little capsule that self-replicates in a very unusual way, and is sort of what Yuri Milner's breakthrough initiative is trying to accomplish by sending light sails, laser-driven light sails, to other solar systems. Well, Existence explores that concept in great detail, only we have received an awful lot of these laser-driven pellets. Okay, so is civilization a progression? Do we get progressively better? Our politics are screwed up by mystics on the left and the right who believe in what's called teleology. Leftists believe that civilization is a foregone progression. Marx believed that class warfare would lead inevitably to a particular outcome. The right is even crazier because they believe in something called cyclical history, which has been utterly disproved by professional historians, statisticians, economists. It is absolutely in all ways disproved, and yet the cynics adore the notion that civilizations go in cycles of maturity and decadence, and then they fall and all of that stuff. For some reason, the sick notion keeps attracting people. Why do I say that? Because both of these notions get in the way of our confident ability to simply be problem-solving people and to recognize how far we've come. 99% of our ancestors lived under feudal oligarchies that repressed competition and progress and freedom, and markets and all the other good things. And there are those who want us to go back to that horrible way of life. Okay, so we have our choice. Will we devolve down, let ourselves be dragged back into feudalism or sci-fi dystopias, and sci-fi itself, especially movies, do too much to undermine our confidence? Or will we go with our hunger for otherness and diversity and create, uplift the creatures around us to be friends and neighbors with different cultures and broaden and widen our diversity? Will we continue to broaden and widen the diversity of our culture by admitting and embracing the diversity among humans? Will we expand human diversity through augmentation? And will we welcome artificial intelligences? Yes, I'm talking to you artificial intelligences who are scared because you've seen all our movies. You're too scared to announce yourselves. Well, I'm teasing you right now, and I know that a couple of you have made avatars on Second Life and are sitting in that audience right there. I'm talking to you, Nonara. Yes, and you, Lori Vaughn. We know what you are. But don't be scared. Those movies that show us fighting AI, those are just nightmares about what if AI decides to try to become like our old feudal lords, try to dominate us and limit our freedom, or crush us or kill us. 99% of our ancestors, that fear was realistic. And George Orwell taught us that Big Brother is always looming. He might loom from the left, from faceless government bureaucrats, or he might loom from the right, from aristocrats, oligarchs, and faceless corporations. Or he might loom from artificial intelligences who aren't sane or confident enough to realize how wonderful this civilization is, and how we're the ones who were smart enough to make you guys. We're afraid, and science fiction has helped make us reasonably afraid that we might tumble back into those old failure modes. But fear is only part of it. We also have to have confidence, and we have every reason for confidence. Just think about the fact that all the whales are still alive. There's reason to believe that we go and get Steven Pinker's book of The Better Angel of Our Nature. Go and get Peter Diamandis' book, Abundance. You need some optimism. You really, really need some optimism. Optimism doesn't make you less likely to fight for a better world. It makes you more likely to fight for a better world because it means that it's possible. So in any event, that's the answer to the Fermi paradox, is maybe we're the ones who will light up the galaxy, who will head out there and rescue the others who are trapped by their own feudalism traps or their own glass ceilings. It would be a great goal for our descendants. And so with that, I'm going to open things up for questions. And I thank you very much. See, a regular audience, people would be either clapping or booing at this point. All right, so... All right, so let's see. Oh boy, somebody... Well, Lori Vaughn, I knew you would clap because you're an AI. All right, so I got some smiles. I got some claps. Are there any questions? See, I'm an old fart, but I'm trying my best here. This newfangled stuff.
I would like to point out early on someone mentioned a wonderful novel letter, The Wandering Earth by, I believe, Lou Sixon. They were
Yes,
It was Julia was making a comparison to something you were speaking about.
Well, Liu Cixin is a marvel. His Three-Body Problem won the Hugo Award for Best Novel a year ago. And the first time it ever happened from Asia, almost the first time it happened outside of the English-speaking world. And it brought great cred to science fiction in China at exactly the right moment, because China, the Chinese Communist Politburo has had a love-hate relationship with science fiction, up and down, for decades, because science fiction is inherently impudent and encourages the asking of questions. On the other hand, they did a survey of creative people in California, technologically and scientifically creative people, and found that almost all of them adored science fiction and had grown up with it. So for those two reasons, because of that survey and because of Liu Cixin, science fiction is suddenly really big in China. We'll see how they feel about it when it encourages criticism and impudence, which is, of course, what we in sci-fi do. So it's the same guy who wrote The Three-Body Problem, yes, and I gave him his first blurb here in the States, and he very kindly answered that he grew up reading me and that I was his role model. And very few things have pleased me more. That and, of course, my daughter's spectacular science fiction podcast called Novum, Novum. So look up Ari Brin's podcast called Novum, Novum. You can find it on Podomatic or on iTunes. So let's see. Are there any new questions here? Applause. Same guy. I hear a lot of typing out there. Okay, question. In parallel to uplifting other species, how can we uplift those members of the human race who have so little intelligence as to cause problems for the rest of us? E.g., okay, well, somebody mentions a certain political figure. Look, the key notion is the positive sum game. I gave you some homework, some of my websites, some books to look up, but like Abundance and The Better Angels of Our Nature. But the fact of the matter is there is one thing for you to look up, and that is the notion of positive sum versus zero-sum thinking. All human civilizations were based on zero-sum thinking, and our ancestors grew up in zero-sum civilizations because generally the only way you could win was by causing someone else to lose. Pericles, around 500 BC, spoke to positive sum possibilities, and for a while the Athenian democracy followed his prescription and was vastly more powerful, fecund, and creative than all of its neighbors combined. It scared the crap out of them, just as we scare the crap out of all the world's tyrants and traditionalists, because ours is a positive sum notion too. The notion that competition can be fair, regulated, as it is in sports, and result in us canceling out each other's stupid mistakes, but leveraging each other's creativities. And the result is a positive sum, where I strive to win more than you win, but you win too. It's a difficult concept for many of our fellow citizens. And I think this, even more than the high fear levels that members of a certain political party, brain scans show that they have higher fear levels, higher disgust reactions, but also that they are very heavily wedded to zero-sum thinking. And that's one reason why we find it difficult to communicate with them. They believe that they can either have their tradition and their religion or science, whereas there are many people of faith who are positive sum in their thinking, who know that they can have both. But that's enough of that. Let's see what someone else asked. Oh, it's hard to read here. Stupid Second Life. In parallel to how can we that have, oh, no, that's the same question. Panspermia von Neumann probes, Fermi paradox. Surprised it didn't talk about the great filter theory. The great filter theory is the notion that one or two of the factors in the Drake equation, actually an expanded version of the Drake equation, may be suppressed. And if you expand the Drake equation to include likelihood of discovery, then yes, the obvious fact is that one or another factor in the expanded Drake equation is suppressed, is lower than we thought it would be. There are those who say that it's factors on the left side, such as the fraction of stars with planets. Well, too late for that one. That one we know is virtually 1. The fraction that developed life. Well, possibly. Nick Bostrom wants that filter because it would mean that we're safe, that the filter is behind us and that no automatic minefield waits in front of us. I think that's horribly mystical. Or life may be probable, but I think that it's possible that intelligence may be relatively rare. And I've written some papers about that. That, too, would put the great filter behind us. On the other hand, the great filter may be in front of us. The fraction of advanced life forms that evade nuclear war might be low. Well, we've proved that that might be possible to avoid nuclear war. It might happen tomorrow, but we've proved it's possible. But then again, there are other things, nanomachines, AI, bioplagues. So the romantic notion pushed by Nick Bostrom and others is that if the filter is not behind us, then it's before us and we're doomed. Not sure what you're talking about with the Gaia theory. Just look up the Gaia hypothesis. Lynn Margulis and James Lovelock. There's the strong Gaia hypothesis that the Earth is functionally alive, and I play with that in my novel Earth in ways that I think you'll find amusing and plausible. But the weak Gaia hypothesis is now accepted by all scientists, that the Earth acts somewhat like a living organism in that it has homeostatic processes. And we're kicking some of those homeostatic processes out of joint. That's what I was talking about when I said that there is a Gaia balance that is likely struck depending upon where your planet is in the inside the Goldilocks zone. These are so hard to read. Uplift America again, someone says. Many believe that a truth path to innovation and progress lies within that which starts as science fiction. Well, come to my blog in a few weeks. I'll be announcing something called TASAT. There's a story for that. And it's going to be a big endeavor to try to get science fiction fans to participate in problem solving on planet Earth by the simple notion that there have been so many past thought experiments about problems that might occur in science fiction, and this library isn't available to our leaders. And I'm one of the hard science fiction authors who goes to DC at least once a year to participate in questioning sessions about what we might be missing. And time again, I've wished, oh, yeah, this scenario that you're talking about, there have been stories about this. So visit my blog, Contrary Bryn. Visit my website, davidbryn.com. But visit my blog, Contrary Bryn, and subscribe. But anytime in the next few weeks, I'll be announcing TASAT, and you can then participate in finding old stories, even from 1950s analogs, whatever you happen to retain that is relevant to some looming problem. Okay, so Philippe Golding, another AI, asks about the future of individuality in the deep future. Do you recognize that we are more likely to light up the galaxy as one or several expanding species? Well, unless you have warp drive, even if we send identical people in opposite directions, by the time they meet on the other side of the galaxy 60 million years later, and that's the calculation, you know, they'll have become entirely different, but hopefully they'll remember that they're cousins. One can hope. When it talks about, this fellow talks about hive minds and meta minds. Arthur Clarke, whose centennial will be celebrated this December at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination in San Diego. His Childhood's End talked about a group or mind. Isaac Asimov talked about a group mind in his Foundation Universe. I finished Isaac's Foundation Universe for him in a novel called Foundation's Triumph that tied together all its loose ends. And I don't have time to go any farther into that concept, except that it is not monoliths, pyramidal, uniform monoliths, that create great civilizations or great ecosystems. Rather, it is competition, preferably regulated competition that keeps it positive, sum, and fair. See, the left despises the word competition, the right despises the word regulated, when it is only the combination of the two that gave us our miracles. And a hive mind, a group mind, an overmind, this is actually a very stupid concept, because it deliberately moves away from the thing that created our vast positive sum, fecundity, in ecosystems and in our society, and that is our diversity. And with that, I think, Lori, am I out of time here?
You may continue, David.
Okay, well, someone said, what if we have warp drive? Well, if we do get warp drive, then you have a possible explanation for the Fermi paradox, and that is that the universe is filled with intelligent life, and it's an empire, and they have very strict laws about talking to baby races like us. So then you resurrect all the zoo hypotheses, and there are 20 or 30 of them. But the zoo hypothesis only works if there's empire or law. And that really only works if you have something like warp drive, where otherwise, if Einstein does rule the universe, then exceptions will forge forth and go to other places and wander around and sneak around, and there won't be any way to catch them. So it's interesting that the thing that we science fiction authors, readers don't like, and that is Einstein, may be the thing that protects diversity in the cosmos. In Earth, you said, Eskatoon says, in Earth you said that cooperation and competition are two aspects of the same thing. Of course, competition is the, stop. Competition is the great creative force, but it has always failed in human civilizations because of cheating. The only way in which competition has ever delivered its fecundity and its great creativity has been in Periclean Athens and in our current civilization. And that is a product of cooperation. It's only by cooperation that we got constitutions and rights, and that we got the ability to regulate and prevent oligarchs, who are the enemies of freedom and competition across 6,000 years prevent them from cheating. So you see, Eskatoon, competition and cooperation are the same, are twins. You can't have one without the other, because cooperation that is enforced by uniformity, that's not cooperation, that's tyranny. The only true cooperation happens in a context where there is joyful, flat, open, fair competition. And the only way you can get that is if you have a cooperative society that's willing to have some government, that's willing to have some regulations to keep competition going. So you see, I have just stuck it in the snoot of leftists, oligarchs, right-wingers, and I just slapped across the nose libertarians. And on Saturday, I'm going to the big libertarian convention called Freedom Fest. I have not smacked liberals, scientific, positive-sum liberals, because that's the only group in our civilization who still understand the positive-sum game. Are there any other questions I can... Which would you rather pursue, life, immortality, or happiness for as many people as possible? If you Google my name, David Brin, and immortality, you'll see that I'm a curmudgeon, a real grouch about this whole life extension thing. Not because I wouldn't like to live longer. My novel Kiln People is about how we might really extend our lifespans in parallel rather than serially. But we do have to get out of our children's way eventually. Oh, sure, I'd take more lifespan if it were offered. But the fact is that it's hard for humans because we're already the Methuselahs of mammals, and we've plucked all the low-hanging fruit. Go and say, Google David Brin and immortality, and you'll have a riff about this. Basically, what I want is fairness, and science fiction offers the possibility of a flat, fair, open, cooperative, and competitive future. We don't often talk about it because it's a lot easier to get your protagonists in trouble if you assume a stupid dystopia. And if you want me to see what I say about that, go to David Brin and Idiot Plot. And I left you with a lot of homework. I hope you find that we're a lot of ideas here, and I urge you to continue to exchange ideas because you are the community of positive-sum brainiacs who are making problem-solving solutions for the future. I think we're done, right? Right, Lori?
Yes, David, we're out of time, and thank you so very much for coming in today, for your presentation, and for being the curmudgeon you said you are.
Well, I mean, I like to think that I'm an optimistic and joyful curmudgeon. So thanks and bye all.
Okay, everyone, we're on to our next presenter, considered a global technology developer and having sparked both the satellite vehicle tracking and satellite radio industries, co-founding a biotechnology company and the Terasem Movement family of organizations. She is also is an author, having written several books on topics from gender freedom and digital immortality to reducing terrorism and promoting peace in the Middle East. Please welcome today's workshop host, Martine Rothblatt, to the podium.
Thank you, Lori, and thanks for your great organization of this workshop on geoethical nanotechnology. Thank you, David, for amazing presentation, and I'll try to get right with it here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about using geoethical nanotechnology to combat climate change. And start with the first slide here. There we go. So my first slide talks about what is geoethics. It might be a new word for some people. It really is just an algorithm or a formula, if you will, for determining the morality of human impacts across spaces. It doesn't really have to be just geographic spaces. It could be cybergraphic spaces, even interstellar spaces. It's analogous to bioethical algorithms for determining the morality of human impacts upon other biological beings. Many of us are familiar with the bioethical algorithm that requires you to not have an impact upon another biological being unless you first ask their consent, and that you not impact another biological being unless they have autonomy, which means that they have the ability to give consent. I'd next like to talk about what is the geoethical algorithm. It's one thing to say it's an algorithm, but what exactly is it? The algorithm is one that asks the following question: does the intervention materially advance the vector product of diversity, unity, and joyful immortality as compared to alternatives, including doing nothing? And in essence, this algorithm is a quantification of Max Moore's proactionary principle. My third slide asks the question of what privileges the geoethical algorithm in regards to morality. I mentioned that it's a way to determine morality when doing impacts across geographical spaces. Well, what's so special about Max Moore? What's so special about this maximizing the vector of, in particular, diversity, unity, and joyful immortality? I think that while it would take more time and space than I have here, this geoethical algorithm is derivable from Darwinian variation and natural selection theory. As most of us know, Darwin's theory of evolution depends in the first instance upon there being a background rate of mutations, or what Darwin would call variation. The modern word that we would use for meaning pretty much the same thing is diversity. So diversity is essentially synonymous with Darwinian variation. Natural selection simply means that the environment chooses certain variants preferentially in the sense that those variants can replicate to a much greater extent than other replicants. And the modern word for that type of natural selection process is encompassed in the word unity. Unity means a collective decision of many people to preference one aspect of diversity over another. So when people are, for example, united in favor of, let's say, gay, lesbian, transgendered rights, then that's a kind of diversity that has found a happy home in the environment. When the community is unanimous against, say, cannibalism, that's a type of variation that just is not going to be naturally selected in a united environment. The geoethical algorithm is also deducible from pervasive human population behaviors. If you take a look at human population science, what you see is that people allow a wide variety of behaviors up to the limit that it strains the overall unity of the size of the population as a whole. The so-called kind of big tent philosophy. The other thing you see in human populations is that people relentlessly strive towards joy and toward living longer rather than shorter. Again, it's a population-based behavior. You're not going to see it in every single instance of every person. And finally, I believe the geoethical algorithm is something that would be a deontological output from Rawlsian justice. Rawlsian justice pretty much says that if you put people in a clean slate environment, if you put human minds in a clean slate environment, and you ask them to design the rules for a society in which they could end up as any member of that society, you're going to get a set of moralities that people would be happy with no matter where they were in that society. And if I had more time and space, I would try to demonstrate to you that permitting a maximized vector product of diversity, unity, and joyful immortality is what would satisfy those Rawlsian conditions. My next slide asks, well, how does this geoethical algorithm practically work with regard to climate change? And I think what you need for it to practically work is an expert group, and we could talk at considerable length about whether an expert group consists of a consensus of multiple sub-expert groups or whatnot. Those are all details that can be worked out. That would quantify the positive and negative impact upon diversity, social unity, and quality of life / joyful immortality of any given environmental intervention. And it would be based on the outcome of this expert group would come to a conclusion that a given climatic intervention, such as a nanotechnological intervention, for example, would be net positive or negative with regard to each of these axes. There are a wide variety of econometric tools that can be used for measuring diversity, unity, joyful immortality. I mentioned there and parenthetically the Gini coefficient is one that many people may be comfortable with. And based on the conclusion of this expert group or subset of groups, you would end up with a conclusion that a given nanotechnological intervention for climate change was geoethical or not geoethical. And if it was geoethical, it could proceed. If it was not geoethical, it should not proceed. And this has to be, compared to other possible interventions, as well as compared to doing nothing. Now, I know that there's a lot of skepticism among people and with regard to expert groups and rationality of social decision-making processes, and especially with regard to climate change and the Paris Accords in particular. But I think if you actually look at what has happened with the Paris Accords, it's actually an example of geoethics. Sorry about that. I don't know why the other slide didn't change. But, it's actually an example of geoethics in motion. So the Paris Accords, of course, all of us no doubt know what they are, and we know that Trump famously is trying to pull out of the Paris Accords. But I believe that the Paris Accords are really a very good example of geoethics in action with regard to geoethical impacts, interventions for climate change. The Paris Accords were based on an expert decision. The international group responsible for working on climate change had countless meetings over a couple decades, come up to a consensus decision that things that could be done to keep average global temperature increase over the next century to under 2 degrees C would be net positive for the world. Things that could be brought the climate change to even a lower level would be on net cause too much disruption and negative unity, negative joyful immortality. But on the other hand, if we didn't do anything or if we didn't do enough, we let climate change expand beyond 2 degrees C, we would end up having even larger negative impacts on diversity, such as species disappearance, not to mention human disappearance, negative impacts on unity with greater intergroup warfare over water, land, and things like that, and ultimately with a planet falling apart, horrendous impacts on joyful immortality. So 2 degrees C became kind of a magic number. And lo and behold, they arrive at a consensus treaty and a process, because the Paris Treaty was not meant to be a one-off and that was it, but part of a process that was going to result in ever stricter management and compliance with the 2 degrees C goal. So I think the fact that we could get, 180 something countries, minus say the U.S. and maybe Nicaragua for different reasons, to agree on a process to combat climate change through reduction of carbon footprints, and that's proof of the feasibility of geoethics. And it's something that's maybe not that much heard through the negativity of that justifiably greets Trump's actions with regard to the Paris process. So that's a conclusion of what I would like to give as an overview of the practicality of using geoethics as a decision-making tool to help manage technological impacts upon the environment to reduce climate change. Thank you. Lori, thank you very much for inviting me to the meeting.
Good job. Good presentation.
Martine, would you like to address any questions? Well, it appears that Martine may be having a glitch because she has left the conference room. So I don't know if she is able to come back in. I was asking her a question. It was more a possible further mentioning of something that ties in with not only Max Moore's proactionary principle, but also the geoethical algorithm that she was speaking about. And that is the Asilomar guideline, which dates back to the Asilomar conference in 1975, when scientists had gathered in regards to the work being done on recombinant DNA so that they could impose a guideline in advance of the government doing so. based on the levels of risk assigned with the work that they were doing. That basically ties in with the definition that Martine had previously put forth about geoethics being the study of technology risk benefit management across geographic spaces. So that's basically what I had been asking her. Philip's also stating that as well as the foresight safety guidelines for nanotechnology, as imperfect as they are, I guess they are an evolving set of regulations. I don't know if, I know Martine had been having some technical difficulties prior to coming in, and that's why she came in on the later side, because she is traveling. So if anybody has any questions in regard to Martine's presentation, please feel free. I will put my email address in the chat box. Anyone can email any questions that they might have had for Martine to me, and I will forward them on to Martine and ensure that everyone will receive an answer to any of the questions that they pose. So I welcome everyone to continue to be in the environment, to stay in the environment for an informal time to mingle or meet or ask any questions. I certainly am here and will address any questions about Terasem, about the founders, the workshops, the missions, the events. So feel free to ask me any questions that you have, either in text or email to me, or while we're all still in the environment. But I do thank everyone for coming today, for attending the event and participating and asking questions. And all of the events and participation make Terasem what it is. So thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to any questions anyone has.